The unease was palpable, a silent tension that clashed with the clinic's usually hushed atmosphere. Hunched in her chair, the young girl stubbornly avoided all eye contact, her hands nervously twisting the drawstring of her hoodie. To the staff, it was initially just ordinary anxiety, the usual jitters of a medical appointment. But a few minutes later, facing the ultrasound screen, the doctor would feel a cold sweat break out on his brow, his gaze frozen by disbelief and a growing panic. The fading light of Santa Rosa, a modest city in Sonoma County, was already filtering through the blinds. Dr. Evan Lamb glanced at his watch as he stepped out of an examination room. At 52, the respected family physician felt the weight of a long day settle on his shoulders. His independent clinic, opened a few years earlier in the heart of this residential neighborhood, had built a solid patient base. "Calling Rosa," he called, approaching the nurse's station. "Mrs. Hernandez left this behind." He handed her an eyeglass case. "I'll call her right away," the nurse replied with a smile, placing the item in a drawer. As Dr. Lamb prepared to head back to his office, his gaze swept over the nearly deserted waiting room. Closing time was approaching. That's when he saw them, in a corner. A stocky man in a blue polo shirt, and beside him a frail figure in a red hoodie. A flash of recognition crossed his face. "Marco?" the doctor said, walking over with a warm smile. "Marco Halen, is that you? I didn't know you had an appointment." The man rose at once to shake his hand. "Dr. Lamb, good to see you." "We're neighbors, Marco. Call me Evan outside of here," he replied, before turning his attention to the girl. Her gaze remained fixed on the floor, as if the tiles held some fascinating secret. "And this must be Lucia, I presume. I don't think we've been properly introduced, though I have seen you around the neighborhood." Lucia's only response was an imperceptible nod, never once lifting her eyes. A subtle unease hung in the air. Dr. Lamb felt it, but he chalked it up to teenage shyness. "We'll be with you in just a moment," he assured them. "I'm just finishing a few things. Paperwork." Back in the quiet sanctuary of his examination room, Dr. Lamb settled behind his desk, the rustle of a patient's chart the only sound. A moment later, Rosa Delgado, his nurse assistant, slipped into the room. She moved with a practiced efficiency, the sharp, clean scent of disinfectant filling the air as she began methodically sanitizing the equipment for the next patient. "Dr. Lamb," Rosa began, her voice lowered, "there's something thoughtful, off about that father and daughter out there." He looked up from his notes. "Curious? What do you mean?" Rosa's brow furrowed, her hands pausing over the ultrasound machine. "When I took the girl's vitals, her father wouldn't let her speak, not a single word. He answered everything for her, even her own name." She shook her head, a flicker of frustration in her eyes. Annoyed, I had to remind him repeatedly that I needed to hear from the patient, and the girl, Lucia, she won't make eye contact. Not once. Dr. Lamb leaned back, a faint escaping his lips. "I know them, Rosa. They live just 3 houses down from me. Marco can be a bit authoritative. Some fathers are just like that." "I'm Mexican too, Dr. Lamb," Rosa replied, her tone firm but respectful. "This isn't cultural. This is something else." She paused, then gave a slight shrug as if resigning herself. "But you know them better than I do. Maybe it's just their family dynamic." She placed the girl's chart on his desk. Dr. Lamb's eyes scanned the intake form, then widened. The words seemed to leap off the page. He murmured them aloud, a cold knot forming in his stomach. 14 years old, with pregnancy symptoms. Rosa nodded grimly. "That's why I'm concerned." A heavy silence filled the room. "Send them in," Dr. Lamb said finally, straightening his white coat, his professional mask sliding firmly into place. The door opened, and Marco guided Lucia into the room with a firm, proprietary hand on her shoulder. The girl moved as if walking on eggshells, her body tense, the red fabric of her hoodie hanging loosely over her small frame. "Thank you for seeing us, doctor," Marco said, his voice a little too loud for the small space. "Especially this late." He took the chair beside the examination table. Of course, Dr. Lom replied, his voice calm and even. What seems to be the problem? Marco, a dry, uncomfortable sound. It's not easy to say this, but my daughter is pregnant. Hearing the words spoken so bluntly, despite having just read them, sent a chill through Dr. Lom. He turned his gaze to Lucia. She remained a silent statue, her eyes fixed on her hands, which were folded tightly in her lap. I see, Dr. Lom said carefully, his voice gentle. Lucia, how have you been feeling? Before the girl, Dr. Lom held Lucia's gaze, refusing to be drawn in by the father. Lucia, he repeated softly, would you prefer to answer these questions yourself? The girl's head moved in a nod so slight it was almost imperceptible. And how, Dr. Lom pressed on, his question directed squarely at the silent girl, did this pregnancy occur? Again Marco answered for her, his voice sharp and dismissive. She has a boyfriend. We don't want to talk about him. His tone was a brick wall, making it clear the subject was closed. He leaned forward, his expression intense. Doctor, we need this to stay confidential. No one can know, not our neighbors, not anyone. Patient confidentiality is standard protocol, Mr. Hallen, Dr. Lom assured him, though the desperate emphasis felt strange. I cannot discuss any patient's case with others. Relieved. Good. Good. Marco nodded, satisfied. Dr. Lom turned back to the girl, the room's central silent mystery. I'd like to perform an ultrasound to check on the baby and determine how far along you are. Is that okay with you, Lucia? She nodded, a silent consent given to the floor. Her eyes never met his. Rosa will help you on to the examination table, Dr. Lom said, his professional voice masking a deep and growing dread. Preparing the ultrasound machine. You'll need to lift your shirt just above your abdomen. Rosa's voice was a soft comfort as she guided Lucia to the table. The girl let out a as she lay back, her body rigid. Concerned. Does that hurt? Rosa asked, her voice laced with concern. Lucia could only nod. The abdominal pain? Marco explained from his chair. It's been getting worse. Dr. Lom squeezed the cold gel onto Lucia's stomach. He saw how she flinched, not just from the cold, but from his touch. He picked up the transducer, and the monochrome world of the womb flickered to life on the screen. He moved the device across her belly, his eyes scanning the grainy, shifting shapes. Then, he froze. His professional calm began to fray at the edges. This is, he began, his voice trailing off as he adjusted the gain for a clearer image. Lucia, you appear to be approximately 28 weeks pregnant. Marco's head snapped up. That can't be right. It hasn't been that long. Dr. Lom's gaze, now sharp as a scalpel, shifted to the father. Have you taken her to an obstetrician before this visit? No, Marco said, his voice clipped. This is the first time. Dr. Lom turned his attention back to the screen, his concern mounting. It's a girl, he said. Then his brow furrowed into a deep line. But I'm seeing some concerning signs. Her abdominal circumference doesn't match the typical growth patterns for 28 weeks. This suggests what we call intrauterine growth restriction, or IUGR. What does that mean? Marco demanded. It means the baby isn't growing at a normal rate, Dr. Lom explained, his voice low and serious. It can be caused by placental issues, maternal health, a number of things. He repositioned the transducer, his movements now slow and deliberate. A moment passed. I'm also detecting an irregular fetal heartbeat. He turned to face Marco directly, the gravity of the situation etched on his face. Mr. Hallan, I am strongly recommending you take Lucia to the hospital immediately. She requires a level of specialized care I cannot possibly provide in this clinic. Marco's face darkened. The hospital? Why? Can't you just give her some medicine? This is beyond medicine, Dr. Lam countered, his patience wearing thin beneath a veneer of professionalism. This requires advanced monitoring, Doppler studies to assess blood flow, constant observation by specialists. The hospital is equipped for that. Marco's jaw was set, his posture radiating resistance. Dr. Lam knew he couldn't let them walk out that door. A sudden necessary stratagem formed in his mind. "Look," he said, shifting his tone. "I can give you a prescription for prenatal vitamins, calcium, and folic acid. It's not—"
"You can get this filled while Nurse Rosa helps Lucia clean up." Marco hesitated, his eyes darting between the doctor and his daughter. "She'll be fine," calmly Dr. Lam assured him, his voice a calm command. "We'll just clean off the gel and print the ultrasound images for the hospital. She can meet you at the pharmacy in 5 minutes." Reluctantly, Marco took the paper and walked to the door. He gave Lucia one last, lingering look before it clicked shut behind him. The moment the latch engaged, the tension in the room seemed to dissolve, replaced by a fragile quiet. Rosa began to gently wipe the gel from Lucia's abdomen with a warm cloth. "You're going to be okay, sweetie," she murmured. That was all it took. The simple act of kindness shattered the girl's composure. Lucia's eyes, dry until now, suddenly welled with tears that traced silent paths down her temples. "She kicks when she hears his voice," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I hate that she likes him." The words, barely audible, landed in the sterile air with the force of a physical blow. Dr. Lam and Rosa exchanged a single, horrified glance. An unspoken, terrible understanding passed between them. The girl's statement hung there, its ambiguity a thin veil over a monstrous meaning. "Lucia," Dr. Lam said, his voice barely a whisper, his heart pounding against his ribs. "What do you mean by that?" But the fortress had been rebuilt. Lucia's brief, terrifying moment of openness was gone, and she retreated back into a profound, unreachable silence. His medical mind scrambled for a rational explanation, teenage angst, misplaced resentment, anger at the father for his strictness. But deep down, a cold, sickening certainty began to take root, a truth far darker than any diagnosis he had ever delivered. He said gently, the words feeling hollow and false even as he spoke them. "Your father brought you here because he cares about your health. Now, we need to focus on making sure you and the baby are okay. That's why it's so important that you go to the hospital right away." He held out the printed ultrasound image. Lucia took it, her small hand barely trembling. She stared down at the black and white photo, not with the wonder of an expectant mother, but with a vacant detachment. To her, it was not a life, not a person. It was an abstract blur, a meaningless shape, the physical proof of the secret she was forced to carry. Through the glass panel of the door, a shadow moved. Marco was returning from the pharmacy, the small white paper bag in his hand, a symbol of his feigned concern. Dr. Lam felt a surge of desperation. The moment was lost. The fragile window into Lucia's truth had been slammed shut and locked. Rosa, her own face a mask of carefully controlled emotion, helped Lucia sit up. The girl moved with the silent compliance of a ghost. A moment later, Marco entered the room, his presence instantly filling it with an oppressive weight. Dr. Lam watched, powerless, as Marco collected his daughter. His hand landed on her shoulder, not as a gesture of support, but of ownership. He steered her out of the room, out of the clinic, and into the growing darkness of the evening. The chime of the front door closing sounded like a final, mournful toll. Silence descended upon the examination room. It was a heavy, suffocating thing, thick with unspoken words and monstrous implications. Rosa returned, her movements slow, her face etched with a trouble that mirrored his own. She began to methodically gather the remaining ultrasound printouts from the machine, the rustle of the thermal paper a painfully loud noise in the quiet room. She straightened the papers into a neat stack on the counter, her gaze meeting Dr. Lam's. In her eyes he saw the same sickening horror that was churning in his own gut. There was no need for words.
They both knew what they had just witnessed. They both understood the chilling meaning behind a young girl's, "I hate that she likes him," at her watch. Annoyed. "That's it for today, then?" Dr. Lam nodded, but his mind was 1,000 miles away, trapped in the chilling echo of Lucia's whisper.
Yes, they were our last patients.
Rosa began shutting down the ultrasound machine, the clinical beeps and whirs a stark contrast to the dark, formless questions taking shape between them. Her movements were brisk, but her expression was anything but. Thoughtful. That was strange, wasn't it? She finally broke the silence. A girl hiding a pregnancy for 28 weeks? And what she said when he was gone? I know, Dr. Lam agreed, the words heavy in his mouth. It was unusual. What do you think she meant? Rosa pressed, her gaze direct. About the baby kicking when it hears his voice? That she hates that the baby likes him? Dr. Lam ran a hand through his hair, searching for a clinical, logical explanation to anchor himself. I assume she hid the pregnancy. He must have just found out, been angry. She's projecting. Rosa wasn't buying it. But the specificity of it, that doesn't sound like projection to me, doctor. That sounds odd. Wrong, hesitantly. Teenage hormones colliding with pregnancy hormones, he offered. But the explanation felt flimsy, a paper-thin shield against a much darker possibility. Even as he said it, he knew it wasn't enough. The rest of closing was a silent routine, lights off, cabinets locked, the quiet hum of the empty building a constant reminder of the day's last, unsettling encounter. They walked out into the cool night air together. "Good night, doctor," Rosa said, her voice subdued. "You too, Rosa." The drive home was short, but his mind raced. He replayed every detail, Lucia's downcast eyes, Marco's controlling grip, the desperate insistence on secrecy. And those words, "I hate that she likes him." He turned onto his street, the familiar suburban quiet now feeling sinister. As he passed the Halan residence, 3 houses down, his headlights swept across their driveway. The car was there. A cold knot tightened in his gut. Muttering. They didn't go to the hospital, he muttered to the empty car. He pulled into his own driveway and killed the engine, sitting in the sudden, complete darkness. His duty was done. He'd given his medical advice. He couldn't force a patient to follow it. He should go inside, eat dinner, forget. But he couldn't. Lucia's haunted face, her whispered confession, it was a hook that had lodged itself deep in his conscience. With a heavy sigh, he got out and walked back down the silent street. The lights were on at the Halan house, casting a deceptively warm glow. He took a breath and knocked firmly on the front door. It swung open to reveal Marco, a flash of genuine surprise, quickly masked by a neutral, almost guarded expression. "Dr. Lam, is everything okay?" "I was just checking in," Dr. Lam said, forcing a casual tone. "I noticed your car and got concerned. I can't stress enough how important that hospital visit is." Marco's face tightened almost imperceptibly. Yes. Thank you for your concern, doctor. Lucia's already gone. Her mother took her. I just stayed behind to finish up some work." The words hit Dr. Lam with the force of a physical blow. Her mother. In all the neighborly chatter, in all his observations, a mother had never been part of the visible equation. "I see," he said slowly, the gears in his mind grinding. "That's good to hear. I was worried." "Yes, well, she's in good hands now," Marco said, his tone clipped, final. "Thank you for stopping by. It's getting late." "Of course. Good night." The door clicked shut, leaving Dr. Lam on the porch with a profound and sickening unease. He walked home, Marco's lie, because he was suddenly bone-deep certain it was a lie, replaying in his mind. Inside his own house, the silence was deafening. He bypassed the kitchen and went straight to his office. Setting his uneaten dinner aside, he opened his laptop, a line he knew he shouldn't cross already far behind him. A quick search for Marco Hallen brought up a public Facebook profile. He scrolled through photos, then the friend list. A name jumped out. Daniela Rivera. The name was faintly familiar. Her profile picture, a woman with a subtle, sad resemblance to Lucia, tugging at a distant memory. He clicked on her profile. It was a ghost town. No recent family photos, nothing with Marco or Lucia for years. A cold dread crept up his spine. He opened Messenger, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Miss Rivera, my name is Dr. Evan Lamb. I apologize for this intrusion, but I saw your daughter Lucia today. I just wanted to follow up and see how the hospital visit is going. He hit send, his heart pounding. The minutes ticked by. He ate his cold pasta, staring at the screen. Nothing. He got ready for bed. The feeling of wrongness, now a physical weight. As he lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, his phone suddenly chimed. A notification from Messenger. He snatched it from the nightstand. It was a reply from Daniela Rivera. What? Hospital visit. Is something wrong with Lucia? Before his thumb could even begin to type a response, the screen lit up again. An incoming call. A Facebook call from Daniela. He sat bolt upright in bed, his throat tight, and answered. Hello, Dr. Lamb speaking. A voice, frantic and sharp with worry, cut through the speaker. Doctor, what is going on? What's happened to my daughter? What do you mean, a hospital visit? The voice on the other end of the line was tight with confusion and rising panic. I'm not at any hospital. I'm not with Lucia. What is going on? A block of ice formed in Dr. Lamb's stomach. The floor seemed to drop away beneath him. Marco's lie, so casual and assured, was now laid bare. Miss Rivera, he began, his own voice sounding distant to his ears. My name is Dr. Lamb. I saw your daughter at my clinic this evening. Her father, Marco, brought her in. He paused, forcing himself to say the next words. She's pregnant, approximately 28 weeks along. The only response was a sharp, strangled intake of breath. Then, a whispered, broken word. Impossible. The voice was trembling now, thick with disbelief and a dawning horror. That's impossible. I haven't seen my daughter in nearly 3 years. Marco and we've been divorced for 10 years. He has full custody. I'm not allowed near her. Dr. Lamb closed his eyes, the darkness behind his lids offering no comfort. In that single moment, every unsettling detail from the evening crashed together in his mind with sickening clarity. Lucia's averted gaze, Marco's suffocating presence answering every question, Rosa's instincts screaming that this wasn't cultural, that this was something else. And finally, Lucia's own chilling words echoing from the sterile examination room into the dark of his bedroom. She kicks when she hears his voice. I hate that she likes him. The pieces didn't just fall into place. They assembled themselves into a monstrous, unthinkable picture. Miss Rivera, Daniela, he said, his professional tone now a thin shield for the cold dread coiling in his gut. I need to explain the situation to you, and I need you to listen very carefully. He took a steadying breath. Lucia is in her 3rd trimester. The ultrasound showed what we call intrauterine growth restriction and an irregular fetal heartbeat. It means the baby isn't growing at a normal rate and is in distress. He delivered the clinical facts like a surgeon, making a precise, painful incision, knowing that each word was a separate blow. This can be caused by problems with the placenta or certain maternal health issues. He let the medical explanation hang in the air, a necessary but brutal prelude. But beneath the clinical terms, beneath the immediate danger to the baby, lay the true, unspoken horror. It was a question so vile he couldn't yet bring himself to ask it, but one that now screamed in the charged silence between them. If Lucia's mother hadn't seen her in 3 years,
And her father was the only one there? Who was the father of the child?
Fetal conditions.
He paused, letting the clinical terms sink in before delivering the final urgent blow. I also detected an irregular fetal heartbeat. I told them to go to the hospital immediately. For Doppler studies to assess development, there are treatments, but the window to use them could be closing.
A long, agonizing silence stretched across the line, filled only by the sound of a woman's world shattering. When she finally spoke, her voice was a broken whisper.
Oh my God. My baby. My little girl. She's only 14. How? Who did this to her?
Marco told me she has a boyfriend. Dr. Lam replied, but the words tasted like ash in his mouth. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that it was a lie.
I don't know what to do.
Daniela sobbed, her voice cracking with a decade of forced distance and a mother's helpless terror.
I want to see her. I need to see her, but there's a restraining order. Please, doctor, please make sure she's okay. And if she's not, call the police. I don't care what he does to me. This is my daughter.
I understand, Dr. Lam said, the promise solidifying into a heavy weight in his chest. I'll check on her again. I will keep you updated. After the call, he didn't hesitate. He pulled up Lucia's files on his laptop, the stark black and white ultrasound images confirming his worst fears. Compromised blood flow, a fetus starved of oxygen, a situation deteriorating by the hour. The clock read 10:15 p.m. This couldn't wait for morning. He threw his clothes back on and stalked out into the cool, fog-shrouded night. The Holland house was a silhouette against the hazy sky, its lit windows a deceptive beacon of domestic peace. He marched up the walkway and knocked, the sound echoing in the silent street. The door creaked open. It was Lucia. Her eyes, wide and terrified, flickered from his face to the shadows of the room behind her.
Dr. Lam,
she breathed, a ghost of a voice. Lucia, he said, gently but firmly. Did you go to the hospital? She shook her head, her fingers twisting the fabric of her hoodie. I need you to tell me the truth, he pressed, his voice low. What is happening in this house? Before she could form a word, a voice boomed from within, dripping with irritation. Who is it, Lucia? What's taking so long? A flash of pure terror crossed the girl's face.
Please go,
she whispered, her hands already pushing the heavy door closed.
Please.
He put his hand flat against the wood, stopping it. Lucia, I can help you. Let me help.
I can't,
she choked out, her slight frame struggling against his pressure. The door was suddenly wrenched open from the inside. Marco stood there, his face a thundercloud of annoyance. Dr. Lam, it's late. Why are you harassing my daughter? Mr. Halan, Dr. Lam began, his voice level despite the adrenaline coursing through him. I'm here because you lied to me. I spoke to Daniela. Lucia never went to the hospital. Marco's jaw tightened, his eyes turning to cold steel. You've been spying on my family. He was cut off as a porch light flickered on next door. A curtain twitched. They were being watched. Marco's entire demeanor shifted in an instant, the rage masked by a veneer of strained civility. Perhaps, he said, his voice dangerously soft. Menacingly, we should continue this inside. No need to disturb the neighbors. He stepped back, an unspoken command. Dr. Lam hesitated for only a second before stepping over the threshold into the lion's den. The living room was cold and impersonal. Lucia was perched on the edge of the couch, a prisoner in her own home.
She's fine, Marco snapped before Dr. Lam could even speak to her. Just tired. Tired isn't the problem, Dr. Lam countered, turning to face him. Intrauterine growth restriction and an irregular heartbeat are the problem. She needs a doctor. Now. And she will get one, Marco said smoothly. First thing tomorrow. The baby could be in distress now. Every hour matters. Marco's mask finally slipped, his expression hardening into pure callousness. The baby, he said, his voice dropping to a low growl, won't die overnight. Before Dr. Lam could react to the monstrous statement, the doorbell rang. That'll be dinner, Marco said, his shoulders relaxing as he regained control. He walked toward the door, fumbling in his pockets for cash. To Lucia, wait here with the doctor.
The moment his back was turned, Dr. Lam moved to Lucia's side. Are you okay? He whispered urgently. Is there anything you need to tell me? Lucia's eyes darted to her father, who was now distracted, paying the delivery person. In a single, swift movement, she plunged her hand into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a small, thick wad of folded photographs. She thrust them into Dr. Lam's hand, her cold fingers brushing against his. He palmed them, slipping them into his jacket just as Marco turned around. Lucia leaned in, her lips barely moving. More, she whispered, her breath ghosting against his ear. In bedroom. What are you two whispering about? Marco asked. His eyes narrowed with suspicion as he approached with a pizza box. Lucia was just telling me she's hungry, Dr. Lam improvised, his heart hammering against his ribs. A very good sign. See, Marco said with a triumphant, chilling smile, I take good care of her. He set the box down and turned to Dr. Lam, his hospitality now a clear dismissal. Now, I appreciate your professional concern, doctor, but as you said yourself, a pregnant woman needs her rest. It would be bad for the baby if she didn't get a good night's sleep, wouldn't it? Dr. Lam was trapped. He nodded slowly, backing toward the door, the secret photographs in his pocket feeling like a burning weight. He had been dismissed, but he had not left empty-handed. He now held the truth in his hand, and he knew he would be back. A dismissal cloaked in false concern. Yes, rest is important, Dr. Lam conceded, his voice tight. But so is immediate medical care. First thing, tomorrow morning, Marco insisted, his smile a chillingly empty gesture. I promise. Dr. Lam reluctantly retreated, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. At the door, he turned. I'll be checking in tomorrow to see how the hospital visit went. It wasn't a pleasantry, it was a threat. Of course, Marco replied, his eyes cold and dead. Good night, doctor. The moment the lock clicked on his own front door, Dr. Lam tore the photographs from his pocket. He spread them out on his desk under the stark lamplight. His breath caught in his throat. His blood didn't just run cold, it turned to ice. They were not just pictures. They were a graphic, sickening chronicle of abuse, a timeline of stolen innocence. Lucia, on a bed, and Marco, a predator, in plain sight. My God, he whispered, his hands shaking with a violent, helpless rage. Lucia's words from the clinic returned, no longer cryptic, but a scream of horrifying clarity. She kicks when she hears his voice. I hate that she likes him. The truth crashed down on him, a physical, suffocating weight. There was no boyfriend. There was only the man 3 doors down. He wasn't just Lucia's father, he was the father of her child. Without another thought, he dialed 911. Emergency services, what's your emergency? I need to report child abuse and endangerment, Dr. Lam said, his voice a blade of ice and fury. A 14-year-old girl. She is 28 weeks pregnant. The abuser is her father, and both she and the unborn child are in immediate medical peril. While he waited, he worked. He photographed the pictures with his phone, digital copies for an unbreakable chain of evidence. He sent them to Daniela. The message was blunt. I have called the police. They are on their way. This is what he has done. His phone rang instantly. Daniela's voice was a raw nerve of agony and rage. I'm coming! That monster! I'll kill him! Daniela, wait for the police.
Dr. Lom urged, but he knew it was useless.
Minutes later, the street, once quiet, was sliced by the silent sweeping beams of red and blue light. 3 cruisers slid to a stop, a tactical approach. Dr. Lom met them on the lawn, handing the physical photos to a grim-faced detective. Detective Morales. These were given to me by the victim less than an hour ago. She is pregnant. Both she and the baby are at high risk. She said there are more in the house. The detective's expression hardened as he glanced at the images. The house is quiet. Lights on. He gave the order. We're going in. Possible endangered minor. Dr. Lom watched as they moved, a dark, efficient wave flowing toward the house. They knocked. No answer. They announced themselves. Nothing. A radio crackled, movement spotted in a back room. Morales made the call. The battering ram came out. 3 thundering blows, a splintering crash, and the door flew open. They were in. He heard muffled shouts, the sounds of a search. Neighbors crept onto their porches. Then a new cry from inside the house, followed by an officer pointing up. On the roof! He's on the roof! Dr. Lom's eyes shot upward. There, silhouetted against the hazy night sky, was Marco, dragging Lucia from an attic window. He held her wrist in a death grip as she struggled for balance on the steep, tiled slope. Stay back! Marco screamed, his voice a feral roar. You come near us, I swear I'll push her. If I go down, we all go down together. A car screeched to a halt. Daniela burst out, a primal scream tearing from her throat as she saw her daughter on the precipice. Lucia! Lucia's head snapped toward the sound. Mom? That single, hopeful word, that momentary distraction, was all Marco needed. He yanked her closer to the edge. Marco Halan! Detective Morales' voice boomed through a megaphone. Let the girl go! There is nowhere to go! Marco saw the officers now emerging from the attic window behind him. He was trapped. Please, Marco, she's our daughter, Daniela pleaded from below, held back by an officer. She's mine, Marco snarled, a terrifying possessive madness in his eyes. You never deserved her, neither of them. In that final horrifying moment, Dr. Lom understood. Marco wasn't just talking about Lucia. He was talking about the baby she carried. His legacy, his property, to control and, now, to destroy. Seeing the officers close in, his escape gone, Marco's eyes filled with a terrifying final resolve. He tightened his grip on Lucia's arm, and with a final guttural roar of defiance, he lunged forward, taking his daughter with him into the empty night air. No! Dr. Lom shouted, the words swallowed by the sudden, awful silence and the sickening sound that followed. It was too late. With a final guttural roar of defiance, Marco shoved his daughter into the empty air. A collective gasp went up from the street below as Lucia fell, a terrified scream swallowed by the night. She landed with a soft, wheezing thud on the center of the inflatable cushion. Paramedics swarmed her instantly. Above, officers surged toward Marco as he tried to scramble away. He was tackled mid-leap, his face slammed into the roof tiles. The fight knocked out of him before he was efficiently and brutally handcuffed. Dr. Lom didn't wait. He sprinted past the police line to where Lucia lay, a small, broken figure in the center of the inflated vinyl. I'm her doctor, he announced, kneeling beside her as the paramedics worked. Lucia, can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered open, wide with terror and pain. The baby, she gasped, her voice a ragged whisper. Is the baby okay? Dr. Lom gently placed a hand on her abdomen. We'll get you to the hospital to make sure, he said, his voice a calm anchor in the sea of chaos. You are so brave, Lucia. So incredibly brave. The night pulsed with red and blue light. As officers dragged a snarling, handcuffed Marco toward a cruiser, he passed Daniela. He turned and spat in her direction. Ah, this is your fault, he hissed. You were never a mother to her.
Daniela's grief erupted into pure rage. "You monster!" she shrieked, lunging at him before an officer stepped between them. "You're not human!" she sobbed as Dr. Long came to her side. "Predators like him are experts at hiding," Dr. Long said gently, guiding her toward the stretcher where Lucia was being stabilized. "He is the only one to blame. She needs you now. Focus on her." Daniela nodded, wiping her face as she approached her daughter. When Lucia saw her, her own eyes filled with fresh tears. "Mom," she whispered, a universe of pain and relief in that single word as she reached out a trembling hand.
I'm here, baby,
Daniela cried, taking her daughter's hand and covering it with her own.
I'm right here, and I'm never leaving you again.
Dr. Lam rode with them in the ambulance, a silent guardian as Daniela whispered to her daughter, stroking her hair. He listened with his stethoscope to the baby's heart, a frantic, irregular rhythm that was, against all odds, still strong. At the hospital, an emergency team was waiting. Dr. Long delivered a rapid, precise briefing to the attending specialist, Dr. Vasquez. 14 years old, 28 weeks, severe IUGR, fetal arrhythmia, and trauma from a fall. Dr. Vasquez nodded, her expression grim. We'll take it from here. Thank you, doctor. Your actions tonight likely saved 2 lives. In the sterile quiet of a waiting room, the full, horrifying story was finally pieced together. Dr. Lam recounted the evening's events to Detective Morales and a crisis worker from Child Protective Services. We found the room in the basement just like you suspected, the detective said, his voice heavy. Cameras, recording equipment, and his bedroom, hundreds of photos. This has been going on for years. Daniela covered her mouth, a strangled sob escaping. She then told her own story of a gambling addiction, a single night's mistake leaving a 7-year-old Lucia alone, and of a predator who seized his chance, painting himself as the perfect father while systematically isolating his daughter from the world, securing a restraining order to keep the one person who loved her most at bay. Just as her story finished, Dr. Vasquez returned. Lucia is stable, she announced to the anxious room. The baby's heartbeat is still a major concern, but we've started medication. We've also begun steroid injections to accelerate fetal lung development. She is severely malnourished and traumatized, but she is a fighter. And the baby? Daniela asked, her voice trembling. The next 48 hours are critical, Dr. Vasquez said gently. But for now, they are both fighting. She looked directly at Dr. Lam, then at Daniela. She's asking for you, for her mother, and for you, doctor. She says you saved her life. The hospital room was quiet, the steady beep of the monitors a rhythmic counterpoint to the years of silent suffering. Lucia lay on the pillows, an IV line in her arm, but the fear was gone from her eyes. In its place was a fragile, flickering spark of hope. Daniela approached the bed, her steps tentative. Lucia, she whispered, my brave, beautiful girl. Lucia's eyes filled with tears, but these were not tears of pain. Mom, she said, her voice stronger now, clearer. You came back for me. I never stopped trying, Daniela wept, sitting on the edge of the bed and taking her daughter's hand. I never, ever stopped. He made it impossible. But that's over now, Daniela whispered, her voice fierce and protective. That's over, forever. He can never hurt you again. Dr. Lam stood at the foot of the bed, a respectful distance away, a silent witness, not to a medical procedure, but to the first fragile moments of a future being rebuilt from the ashes of a stolen childhood. After a few minutes of quiet tears and whispered reassurances, Lucia looked up, her gaze finding his. Thank you, she said, the 2 words carrying the weight of a lifetime. For believing me, for helping us. You're the brave one, Lucia, Dr. Long replied, his voice thick with emotion. You found the courage to fight back. That's what saved you. Detective Morales stepped forward, his presence gentle. Lucia, I know how difficult this is.
But when you feel ready, we need to ask some questions to make sure your father can never do this to anyone again." Lucia looked at her mother, who squeezed her hand, a silent transfer of strength. "It's your choice, sweetheart," Daniela said. "Whatever you decide, I'm right here." Lucia took a slow, deep breath and nodded, her eyes meeting the detective's. "I want to tell the truth," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "All of it." And then, with her mother's hand anchoring her to this new reality, she began to speak. "There was never any boyfriend," she said, confirming the terrible truth that now hung in the room. She paused, then delivered the final, devastating blow. "My father. He's the father of my baby, too." She recounted a decade of escalating horror, of being pulled from school under the guise of homeschooling, of being locked in the hidden basement room whenever visitors came, a secret buried beneath the floorboards of their quiet, suburban home. "When I got pregnant," she continued, her voice trembling slightly, "he was angry. He wanted me to get an abortion. But then, something changed. He started getting protective of the baby. He said it was ours." She shuddered, a full-body tremor of revulsion. "She started kicking a few months ago. I noticed she would always kick when she heard his voice. It made me sick. I hated that she responded to him." She placed a hand over her belly. "But it's not her fault. She's innocent." "Of course she is," Daniela whispered fiercely. "The photographs," Detective Morales prompted gently. "How did you get them?" "He took pictures. All the time," Lucia said, staring at her hands. "He kept them in a box. Before we left for the clinic tonight, while he was in the shower, I took some. It was the first time I'd been allowed out of the house in so long. I didn't know who to trust, but when you came back to the house, Doctor, I thought maybe you could help."
"You did exactly the right thing," Dr. Long assured her, his voice hoarse.
As if on cue, Dr. Vasquez returned to check the monitors.
"The medication is helping,"
she reported, a small ray of clinical hope in the dark room.
"Her heart rate is becoming more regular, and your own vital signs are stabilizing, Lucia. That's excellent news." "What happens now?"
Lucia asked, her gaze sweeping across the faces of the adults who now formed a protective circle around her. "You're coming home with me," Daniela said, her voice unbreakable. "I have a room for you. I have savings. I have everything ready. I've been ready for years." The CPS worker nodded. "Given the circumstances, that is the best and most appropriate placement." "And him?" Lucia asked, unable to say his name. "He's in custody," Detective Morales assured her. "With the photographs, the crime scene in the basement, and your testimony, he will be facing a lifetime in prison. He will never be free again." A tear traced a path down Lucia's cheek, a tear of relief, of grief, of an ending.
"The baby," she said, looking at Dr. Vasquez. "Will she be okay?"
"We are doing everything we possibly can," the doctor promised. "The next few weeks are critical, but we will fight for her."
"I want to keep her,"
Lucia said quietly, but with a strength that surprised everyone.
"I know I'm young, but she isn't to blame for how she got here. I don't want her to suffer for what he did."
Daniela squeezed her daughter's hand, her own eyes shining with tears of pride.
"We'll raise her together," she promised. "You, me, and your daughter, a family. She will only ever know love."
As the officials departed and a fragile peace settled over the room, Dr. Lam prepared to leave. He had done his part.
"Dr. Lam,"
Lucia called out as he reached the door.
"Thank you for listening, for seeing that something was wrong."
He turned back, struck by the incredible resilience shining in her young face. "I'm just glad I could help."
"You did more than help,"
Daniela said, her voice filled with a gratitude so profound it was humbling.
"You saved them both, when everyone else looked away."
Driving home through the deserted pre-dawn streets of Santa Rosa, Dr. Lom reflected on the night. The Holland house, as he passed it, was no longer just a house. It was a crime scene, a tomb sealed with yellow police tape, a scar on the quiet face of the neighborhood. He had broken rules, crossed professional boundaries, but he knew with an unshakable certainty that he had done the right thing. The first mandate of his profession was to do no harm. But sometimes that wasn't enough. Sometimes the job required more than just medicine. It required the courage to see the suffering beneath the surface, to hear the silent cries hidden in averted eyes and cryptic words. As he finally lay down to rest, he thought of Lucia and her unborn daughter. Their road would be long, but for the first time it was a road that led toward the light, and they would not walk it alone. Because in the end, it wasn't just his medical knowledge that had saved them. It was his willingness to act, his compassion, and the simple human refusal to turn away.